Chapter 3. The Voices of Our Ancestors. I once had a Reiki session at the Angel Therapy Rooms in Islington, where I went on a completely unexpected and quite leisurely cruise back in time, experiencing the voices of my ancestors resonating within me. There's a family story that one of my distant ancestors was Hereward the Wake, once upon a time the King of Anglia, and the legend that became Robin Hood. I call them my Robin Hood heroes memes. The instinctive desire to fight the man, and to share the proceeds with those more in need. That's probably one of the factors that compelled my father to become a policeman, a desire to help one's fellow man. I feel it too, coursing through my veins. Seneca once asked me what I'd do with my share of the money when we finally sold the business. I'll never forget the horrified look on her face when I answered that I'd give it all away. It was the first thing that popped into my mind, and I backtracked fast, assuring her that I'd at least set up a trust fund for the kids. But you know what? I like my answer. You can't take it with you, and you can't eat it, so I'd definitely give it away to worthy causes and to people who need it more than those who would otherwise squander it, just to satisfy some perverted sense of pride. At the end of the Reiki session, I felt cured of the compulsive instinct to help my fellow man, that I'd broken a generations-old instinct inherited from my forefathers. Nowadays I reserve that desire to help for those who ask for it and mean it. A friend of mine has a gorgeous Springer Spaniel that just loves tranquility. He can spend hours bashing through the undergrowth, trees and bushes, tail wagging 1,000,000 miles an hour, eyes bright and shining. He told me that it was so much easier to breed for behaviours than for physical traits. If the mother knows to turn left on command, and the father also knows the same signal, then sure as eggs is eggs, so will the pups, with a little bit of training and imitating other dogs to bring it out of them. Scientists will tell you that most of our DNA is junk, that it serves no useful purpose. I disagree. I believe that there is no such thing as junk DNA. I believe that our predominant thoughts, values, beliefs, instincts, behaviours, and attributes of our ancestors, their memes, are all encoded within our DNA, and in certain states of mind can be accessed and experienced, as I did during that Reiki session. Perhaps this explains what people consider to be a past life experience, or some newfound ability to play the piano with only minimal instructions or practice. With regards to the argument over junk DNA, until recently cellular biologists discarded the junk protein within our cells when investigating the inner workings of our cells. Only recently have they discovered the vital role that these proteins play in the grand scheme of things. They would be wise to at least consider my point, that there's no such thing as junk DNA. Each and every single one of us alive today is the consensus of our ancestors' winning strategies. They have survived war, famine, disease, culture, religion, abuse, natural disasters, and all that life has thrown at them. We are what's left over, after the unsuccessful have all fallen by the wayside, relegated to the minor leagues, and eventually forgotten, a distant memory. Ultimately, that's the fate of humanity 1.0. We should be happy that our forefathers have got us this far, but we should also be honest with ourselves and understand that some of these meme sets are no longer serving us in this post-Savannah world that we now live in, and are unlikely to get us where we want to get to into the future, to the stars. An intelligent extraterrestrial culture, thousands or even millions of years older than humanity itself, would simply prevent it. By definition, such a culture would have technologies far beyond anything humankind has yet achieved, simply by showing up. Perhaps they are watching us, waiting to see how this game plays out before making any final decision about how to handle the threat that humanity might pose to their own existence. By its very nature, humanity 2.0 will prevail because our children's children will be more adaptable. They will not be bred through random selection and the lottery of unplanned natural conception, nor will they be conceived according to some perverted and brutal regime with a hidden agenda. They will be lovingly crafted using the best scientific tools available and nurtured by a loving community who only strives to bring out the best of them and who has the knowledge, wisdom, patience and determination to weed out the worst. I have my doubts that any of the global elite currently pulling the levers and pushing the buttons of our global civilization would qualify. That's not to say that I would propose, for example, to eliminate aggression and anger from the soul of mankind. That would be as ridiculous as proposing that we eliminate love, creativity, intelligence, or nice teeth. Nature selected everything that we currently have, and it's worked for us, more or less. There's nothing inherently wrong or bad or evil about the dark side of our souls. As Frank Zappa puts it, you are what you is. Some of the behaviours embedded in what I like to call the satanic memes are actually useful and good for us. Fun too. The problem, though, is that when certain patterns of behaviour are reinforced through many generations of evolution, they become amplified, much like the positive feedback that causes screeching noise when you point a microphone at a speaker. It's not pleasant. For reasons that I'll explain later in this book, the majority of us should be grateful that we're not descended from Vlad the Impaler, Ivan the Terrible, Attila the Hun, or any other sort of satanic monster from the deep, dark depths of human history. Systematic abuse, whether it's across generations of a family or ritualized in various human cultures, religions, or even entire societies, is wrong. Ultimately, it's just not good for business. Wouldn't it be more intelligent to negate this energy from wherever we find it and to reinforce more harmonious instincts instead? The truth is that the intelligent thing to do is to embrace what we know about the development of sociopaths and psychopaths, blend it with aggression, intelligence, and physical stamina to create an elite warrior class. Just as my friend Springer Spaniel was at his most content following his instincts to flush out birds from the undergrowth, soldiers and commanders bred for excellence on the battleground of the modern world would be at their most content performing their duties that they were designed for. They would be as happy as a bee with a bum full of honey. One thing I learned about sociopaths is that they can spot another sociopath coming from a mile away. Maybe it's something in their mannerisms or the coldness in their eyes as they size each other up, and the mirror cells in their respective brains click with each other in recognition. Let's just say that these people don't play well together. Building sociopathic tendencies into the border guards of our culture would be a sensible strategy. Poachers can become great gamekeepers. When we click with our friends, it's because the mirror cells in our brains resonate in harmony with each other and we recognise what we like about them and about ourselves, reflected in their eyes, the windows to the soul. We just kind of know, in a heartbeat, that our friends share our values, our belief systems, our aspirations, that we have something in common, that we are of the same mind, the same set of memes, more or less. We think the same things at the same time. Until the end of time, I'll never forget the moment I looked into my only nephew's eyes. He was only months old, but as I looked into his eyes, I knew that young Nathan recognised me as family, as he smiled and giggled in recognition. It was mutual and lovely. Lots of friends' kids call me Uncle Tom, but my heart almost burst open with love the first time Nate looked up at me and said, "Uncle Tom, can I please have a glass of water, please?" He's the closest I have to kids of my own and a real sweetheart. More recently, I was at a local motorcycle cafe with some dear friends when a bunch of old boys arrived on their vintage rides. It was like being surrounded by a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting back an image of my grandfather. What I loved about each and every one of these old boys and their lovingly restored machines was what I loved about my grandfather and what I love about myself. It was a beautiful, wonderful experience, and almost completely overwhelming for me. Some of my friends wonder why I spend a lot of time in solitude these days. It's because I can get quite claustrophobic, especially in crowds. As much as I enjoyed living in London, I just couldn't function without strapping on the ego of a 10-foot tall chrome-plated fanny magnet with a sharp-suited silver tongue and a flash beamer. Since my day on the beach, I have become increasingly aware that without much of an ego, I simply reflect back to people what they project onto me. It's quite an experience. When I'm happy, everybody's happy. And when the people around me are unhappy, I feel it too. I really feel it, and it really hurts. Perhaps that's what it means to be a Buddha. Suffice to say, I'm quite particular about who I hang out with these days. Chapter 4. Numbers Don't Lie. My love for Seneca blinded me to a very unpleasant and obvious truth. When I finally did a Google search for sociopath, in a heartbeat I knew that I had found the answer that I was looking for. The final piece of a jigsaw puzzle that has had me baffled for a bloody long time. As I read through the profile of a sociopath, I could easily identify the signs, from the pathological lying to the vicious temper tantrums and lack of remorse, the vague and elusive answers to even the simplest of questions, the ignoring of clear and specific instructions, her unfortunate early childhood experiences, and even the charming personality. It all fit like a glove. It broke my heart when I logically and rationally concluded that the only way to get control of my life back and help our business succeed would be to take on this monster and drag her, kicking and screaming, into taking decisive action, and in so doing almost certainly destroying any chance that I might ever see her again, the love of my life. Sometimes the truth hurts. Another thing I've learned about sociopaths is that they don't like being caught out. They would sooner eat a bullet than admit that they lust for power, control and domination of others, that they take pleasure from inflicting pain on their willing victims. They are also incredibly jealous of other people's happiness. It drives them mad when the people they are closest to are happy and content, because they simply can't feel that way themselves. They just don't have the wiring in their brains. Sociopaths are more common than you think, around 1 person in 25 in the Western world, according to Dr. Martha Stout, author of The Sociopath Next Door. In all likelihood, our political systems, global business empires, secret societies and grand families that currently hold power on this planet are heavily infused by this type of personality, by this meme set. Even when confronted with the ugly truths of climate change and the poisoning of our water with microscopic plastic particles and anti-androgenic chemicals, our leaders have been unable to reach any meaningful agreements to solve the problems. Just like Seneca, their only strategy is to play for time and hope that the problem goes away. One way or another, the problem will go away. Humanity 1.0 will either exhaust all of its available natural resources and starve itself to death, or suffer the consequences of a terminal decline in male fertility, climate change, or some natural disaster or another. I call it nature's revenge. Eventually, unless some magical Einstein-Beard conflation happens, and happens real soon, the problem will go away. It'll go away because there won't be so many people anymore. Whether we like it or not, the truth is as obvious and incontrovertible as gravity. The world we know today is coming to an end. Only time will tell, but I hope to make it through the eye of that genetic needle, and for our culture to thrive on a new earth, minus some of the factors that got us into this mess in the first place. Like Einstein says, you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it in the first place. Let's make sure that when, not if, nature's revenge arrives, that it is the best of humanity that survives and not the worst. Maybe this time around we'll get it more right than wrong. You can't improve what you can't measure. We now have the ability to test for the presence or absence of certain genes from a simple blood sample and a series of challenge-response situations and questions. In this manner, we can quickly and easily understand the truth about ourselves, our friends, our enemies, and our collective instincts and behaviours. Armed with this raw data, a skilled technician, or a sophisticated machine learning AI program, could confidently predict the outcome of many generations of evolution for various combinations of male and female DNA samples. Selecting only the most desired characteristics and traits, the technician, or AI machine mind, would then eliminate any combinations that are likely to result in any serious genetic disorder and eliminate them as possibilities. Only then would a matchmaker propose an introduction between a man and a woman, based on honesty, truthfulness, good science, and a shared vision and desire to build a better world. If a couple happen to click with each other after figuring out what Feynman's plate actually means, they will probably know why. They'll see everything that they like about themselves reflected in the eyes of their potential partners. Click, That's the thing about love. You don't think that you're in love. You know when you're in love. And then we simply let nature take its course. As time goes by, our culture will consciously inherit those behaviours, instincts, talents, values and beliefs that we most desire, and eliminate those that we don't. In the aftermath of nature's revenge, which culture do you think will thrive? Answer, the most adaptable. Which culture do you think will be the most adaptable? The hit and miss genetic lottery of the masses infected with perverted memes? Or a consciously created culture based on truth, love, honesty, maths, and good science? I know where I'm placing my bets. Chapter 5. There's something in the water. The plain and simple truth is that we humans have poisoned our planet with the 100 million tonnes or more of plastic that we've chucked into the oceans of our world. along with a cocktail of anti-androgenic chemicals that mimic the female estrogen hormone and are slowly killing us. We might not notice in our busy everyday lives, but when you stand back and look at the science of it, the changes are as obvious and incontrovertible as gravity. The presence of chemicals called phthalates in our food chain is causing the same result in humans as it does in lab rats and sea slugs. There is a reduction in the distance between the anus and the testes, smaller testicles, and a smaller penis. The reduction in sperm count and quality in the male population of the world is just one consequence of this cocktail of chemicals found in the modern diet. In women, it causes changes such as a larger labia, early menopause, and increased fertility, which is masking the effect in the statistics of population growth. The changes can also be seen in nature, especially in fish. What I found interesting in the documentary Oceans of Plastic is that they failed to mention one of the most significant findings of the research, as described in Alan Weissman's book, The World Without Us. When the particles were analysed, the scientists were baffled at the size of some of the particles. They were so much smaller than they were expecting. It took them a while to figure it out, but in the end they discovered that the source of these microscopic particles was from exfoliates found in women's facial creams. Another aspect to the story which is only now being discovered and studied by scientists is the psychological effect of these phthalates on our minds. The evolutionary psychologist Natalie Angier wrote a book called Woman, which provides an excellent insight into the genetic and mimetic evolution of both men and women alike. Like me, she also has a keen interest in the bonobo monkey, our closest genetic cousins. We have much to learn from them about ourselves. It's only monotheistic, dominated cultures infected with perverted religious dogma that insist on the nuclear family. It makes them easier to control, monitor, and dominate. Welcome to the farm. Down on the farm, as men become increasingly feminized, they are becoming less inclined towards aggressive male behaviour. A good thing, I say. As women become increasingly female, they are becoming increasingly inclined towards female aggression. Not such a good thing in my experience. The same thing holds true with regards to both male and female intelligence, creativity, love, nurturing, healing, etc. and so forth. In effect, men are becoming more like women, and women are becoming more like woman. Do the maths, it doesn't end well. These chemicals are present in the food we eat, in the water we drink, and in the air we breathe. Nowhere on this planet is immune. The same concentrations of these microscopic plastic particles can be detected in samples from all over this planet. It's all around us, and it's going to be around for centuries to come. The question is, will we? Another sad truth is that in the aftermath of nature's revenge, our children's children will be cleaning up after us for a long time. Personally, I want my kids to know that I did what I could to solve this problem once and for all, if I'm ever fortunate enough to have any. There are a great number of things that I miss about living in London, and one day I'd love to return. One thing I'll never miss about London, though, is the water. Living out here in the country, we have to be careful with our water, and we quickly learn to conserve it. Country rules apply. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. A simple piece of country wisdom that can only have good consequences if people in cities did the same. Where I live now, I'm fortunate enough to be on bore water from an ancient source deep within the earth and devoid of any of the chemicals found in rainwater, plastic bottled spring water, and treated town or city supplies. The water here tastes wonderful, fresh, vibrant, and full of what I can only describe as life force. I have a bath set up in the deck outside where I can soak for hours in this energy, gazing up at the full moon, listening to some favourite tunes and allowing the water to wash my soul clean again. It's very relaxing, very healing. I've also experienced this life force in some of the live food I've eaten, especially lobster and crayfish that were alive a few minutes before being served, and in quality fresh organic fruit and vegetables. Can you guess where the live water that I drink gets its life from? It comes from the bacteria and viruses living in the water. I doubt that it would pass any modern food standards, and I'd never in a million years be able to sell it as it is. But the way I said, I've never been healthier, happier, or hornier than I am today. It took a couple of weeks to adjust, but my body is now quite happy to deal with whatever is in the water, and I have a bulletproof immune system. You are what you eat, right? Modern factory farmed animals, industrial crops, and treated water are quite simply devoid of this life force by the time it reaches our mouths. as are most of the heavily processed foods that fill a great number of bellies in the Western world, and a great number of bank accounts for the global corporations that profit from the margins they derive when they add value from their highly protected GM crops, fertilisers and pesticides. Jamie Oliver's food revolution is an example of just how quickly disruptive ideas can evolve on the interweb and challenge outmoded business models that are no longer serving us. Go Jamie. The absence of this life force in the essential vitamins, minerals and trace elements from the diet of most modern city dwellers, combined with the presence of various toxic chemicals, will only ever bring out the worst in people. History teaches us that no matter how civilized we think we are, when we're hungry enough, we'll even eat each other. The factors that have contributed to the collapse of many cultures in our past are now present across most of our planet. The complexity barrier. As an engineer, I was continually frustrated that it would often take me longer to explain what the problem was than the time available to solve it. I call this the complexity barrier, and it comprises 5 main steps, as explained most succinctly by Jared Diamond in his frightening book, Collapse. 1. Failure to anticipate a problem. Groups may do disastrous things because they failed to anticipate a problem before it arrived, usually because they had no prior experience of such things. An example of this might be something like a large CME, coronal mass ejection, from the Sun arriving on Earth and wreaking havoc on the electronic systems that we're increasingly dependent upon for our continued survival. If such a thing would occur, it would knock us back to the Iron Age, or worse. 2. Perceiving, or failing to perceive, that a problem has already arrived. The phthalates present in our water are a good example of how a problem can be difficult to detect, a slow trend concealed within wider fluctuations. As male fertility drops, female fertility increases. 3. Failure to attempt a solution. Often there are clashes of interest between people or groups. In the example of the exfoliates in women's facial products, it's unlikely the cosmetic industry will want to change this practice anytime real soon, due to their understandable desire to make a buck and despite the obvious damage. 4. Disastrous values. Often conflicts of style between people or organisations can get in the way of a solution to the problems of our world. Religious beliefs are a great example. Attempting to outbreed your enemy is not a healthy strategy for any of us in the long run. I was recently horrified by a news story about a bankrupt Asian economy that seemed proud of their sumptuous palaces and empty 10-lane motorways. What's with that? 5. Beyond our current capacity to solve. Sometimes the problems can simply be too difficult or expensive to fix. Even if we were to make the attempt, it might be a case of too little, too late, or the cure might be worse than the disease. Molecular nanotechnology definitely fits this category. It is a technology that can cure the Earth, its people and its wildlife, but only if it's controlled by the right sort of mind. When we look at the problems prevalent in the world today, it's not a pretty sight. Accelerating destruction of natural habitats by means such as deforestation, overfishing and the toxic damage caused by the extraction industries, especially fractionated oil and strip mining. Overconsumption of wild foods, especially fish. Biodiversity losses causing extinctions of valuable food stocks and heritage crops in favour of a limited range of GM foods. Soil erosion and salinisation of our crop-producing fields. Depletion of major energy sources such as oil mean that soon the price of gas is going to be beyond the reach of many folks as we go further beyond the point of peak oil production. Access to reliable fresh water. Humans don't last long without water, same as computers don't operate for very long without electricity. Solar efficiency in terms of Earth's photosynthetic capacity is being compromised as the ice caps melt. White ice reflects most of the sun's energy back into space. As the ice continues to melt, that energy is absorbed by the oceans and becomes a contributing factor. Toxic chemicals. Alien species. We're not talking about ET here. We're talking about plants and animals introduced into an environment that they can thrive in at the expense of the native flora and fauna. New Zealand has its problems with everything from gorse to rats to possums. Just a few introduced species that arrived here on the first ships to arrive, and are a significant problem here in paradise. Elevated levels of atmospheric gases such as carbon dioxide and methane are a major contributing factor in climate change. Unrestrained population growth. Human impact on the environment, especially with regard to the impact the First World is having compared to the Third World countries. As Third World economies bootstrap themselves into a more comfortable way of life, competition for resources with the existing First World economies can only end badly. So, in my professional career, I was well known for bashing a few heads together to get a result, and then apologising at the end of the day, explaining why I had to bypass due process and procedure, and then sharing a beer after the dust had settled. I discovered that when you have to break through the complexity barrier, it's generally easier to get forgiveness and permission. Nostradamus prophesied that the answer to a human plague would be found in space. Many people think that his prophecy means a cure for some contagion might be found in orbit. Personally, I think the human plague he refers to is the sheer number of people on this planet these days, highly condensed into urban areas where illness, disease and memes can spread like wildfire. In the hills, there's a lot more space between people. In the event of a planet-wide deadly virus, that will be a major factor in favour of the survival of country folk over city dwellers, as is a healthy immune system, supported by good food and water, lovely friends and neighbours, and a relatively stress-free lifestyle. Talking about finding the answers to a human plague in space, I also like to think that if we sort our stuff out, that a benevolent extraterrestrial culture with a first contact division might be compelled to come to our rescue and offer us advanced molecular nanotechnology tools that can sort out all the problems once and for all. Only time will tell if this is simply wishful thinking. If they are out there, I suppose they might be quite keen to lend a hand, if only we were to put up our hands and ask for help, and mean it. If so, I suppose that they would be quite choosy about who they give the keys to. We would have to earn their trust and respect and accept that help gracefully. Ward 17 taught me a lot about asking for help and meaning it. If you're clever, try drinking the best natural mineral water you can find shipped in a glass bottle, preferably one with a deposit scheme so that the kids can have fun collecting them with their mates before dropping them off at the comic store where they can swap them for a few bits of scrap metal or some sweets, music, comic books or toys. It takes a few weeks for the effects of phthalates to wear off, and I won't bullshit you, it's not a pleasant experience for the first few days. Good food, herbal tea, massage, relaxing music, hot baths and aromatherapy. A few herbs are also helpful if you flow that way. After a few days though, you'll feel like a fog has been lifted from your brain and you can think clearly again. In fact, you end up feeling pretty darn good. It's a bit like taking a happy pill, but it doesn't wear off. The best part is the dreams. There are also a few other benefits that I'll let you discover for yourself. So, Feebles, if you want to continue drinking 10 to 12 cups of stupid every day while gobbling down plastic fish, knock yourself out. We'll see you on the other side. The dark side of the moon. The moon also has its gravitational effect on water, causing the tides, and in the same manner affecting every man, woman and child on the planet. Our brains are about 75% water, our blood is about 83%, and our muscles are 75% water. Bones are just 22%. It stands to reason that the moon's gravity exerts its influence on us as much as it does on the oceans, causing the tides and having a significant impact upon the weather, as explained by Ken Ring in his excellent weather prediction books. It's no surprise that a woman's menstrual cycle matches the 28-day cycle of the moon, or that lunatics are highly influenced by the full moon. My father told me that during the full moon he always put extra policemen on duty for that very reason. My opinion, for what it's worth, is that the gravitational effect of the moon on the water of our bodies causes different genetic and mimetic behaviours to be expressed during a full moon than at other times of the month, say during a new moon. We also know that small changes in the orbit of the moon can cause larger changes here on Earth, such as spring tides when the moon is closer and ebb tides when it is further away. Logically then, we can conclude that the annual changes in the orbit of the moon exert subtle changes in the behaviours of humans throughout the year. Perhaps there's some truth in the zodiac after all, that after countless millions of years and generations of evolutionary selection under the influence of the moon, that distinct behaviours and personality types have prevailed for different months of the year. That being the case, that the moon has such an enormous influence on human behaviour, then some people are in for a rough ride as our planet Earth lines up with all of the other planets in our solar system, an event that occurs every 26,000 years and is called the Grand Cycle. During this alignment, the force of the moon's gravity exerted on the water of the planet and ourselves will increase as we approach this time and decrease once we are through it. Whatever personality traits, beliefs, behaviours, thoughts and values we hold most dear will become amplified even more. For those who believe in Armageddon, that's what they're going to get. For those among us who have a bit of the night about them, the news isn't good. Increasingly, we are seeing corrupt, power-hungry, tyrannical and sadistic people betraying themselves through their words, their actions, their complacency, and their lust for power, control and domination. It hasn't been a good couple of years for the Middle Eastern dictators, the Murdoch media empire, or the global financial system, to name a few examples. As this alignment draws closer, this effect will increase and people's true natures will become increasingly obvious to us all. Pharmaceutical drugs will help for a while to stabilise people's personalities, but in the event it just won't matter. There aren't enough drugs in the universe to prevent what's coming. The truth will eventually emerge, as it always does. What's happening in reality right now is that the soul of mankind is being torn in two. People are either dark with a small flicker of light in their eyes, or they are light with a shadow of the dark to remind us where we came from, just like the yin-yang symbol. We are all, each and every single one of us, faced with a moral dilemma. If you see a fork in the road, take it. Up or down, left or right, north or south, heads or tails, inside or outside, love or hate, yin or yang, win or lose, lead or follow, peace or war, freedom or slavery, live or live. However you define it, that's the choice we all have to make sooner or later. People who choose the dark side are going to get more of it. Hell on earth, as the mirror cells in their brains resonate more and more with each other. They will find themselves magnetically drawn together through the choices they make and the actions they take. Trapped in a hall of mirrors, they will either have to face their demons and evolve beyond their ego, or die a horrible death. This dynamic is best reflected in the music video Better Than I Know Myself by Adam Lambert. In the end, the only person we are at war with is ourselves. Any conflict that we see in the world today is simply a reflection of that inner conflict. I honestly wish that it had been Adam Lambert's good nature that had prevailed. He could have made a different choice. As the alignment draws ever closer, whatever demons lurk in the depths of his soul are going to become manifest. I so wish I was wrong about that. Those of us who have seen the light and in our heart of hearts can look ourselves in the eye and honestly, truthfully like ourselves and know that whatever we've done in life, we've done it with the best of intentions, to the best of our abilities and in spite of the odds. When we know that we're fundamentally good, nice, decent, hard-working and honest, the news is good. When nature's revenge arrives, we'll get more of that. Literally, heaven on earth. As a businessman, I learned a long time ago the value of company policy. We've worked with all sorts of clients. Ones backed by vulture capitalists weren't my favourite experiences. That's why I've had to sell some of them about our new company policy. Sorry, but we only work with nice people. During the peak of the alignment, plants, animals, fish, etc. will be unaffected. Man is the only animal on this planet with an ego, and it's the ego which is affected by the coming alignment, what Christians call the rapture. The manic episode that I experienced was a lot like taking an LSD trip. Like acid, the boundary between the conscious and subconscious mind, the doors of perception, are opened, and you experience the world as your subconscious mind perceives it. Unlike Alice in Wonderland, though, when you go down that particular rabbit hole, it's a one-way trip. On my trip, I found it to be a beautiful experience full of love, healing, wisdom, understanding, real people, and real music. Some other people in Ward 17 didn't seem to be having such a good time. I didn't see much of it. They were locked away in a different part of the ward, but I can guess. I can only imagine what sort of monstrous things they were experiencing through the filters of their own subconscious minds. That's what we're all in for, folks, from the King of England to the beggars in the streets of Mumbai. Call it a day of reckoning, but we're all going to experience it soon enough. I've already experienced it and come through my trial by fire. I know who I am, what I am, and I like myself. I like what's in my heart and soul, in my genes, and in my prevailing meme set. I like how my life's experiences have made me what I am today, a nice guy. How do I know I'm a nice guy? It's easy. I have really nice friends. Chapter 6. The Satanic Memes. Let's imagine a nice, pretty, idyllic village beside the sea called Pandora, in a lovely temperate climate with plenty of fish in the sea, clean drinking water, healthy livestock, an orchard of fruit trees and well-tended vegetable gardens looked after by attentive and caring women folk and some of the older children, while the men go out to the bush hunting for red meat, and where their brothers forge copper and iron into valuable tools the tribe needs to make things a little easier. Now let's imagine that among that tribe is a malcontent, a lazy little bastard called Johnson, who realises that by lying, cheating and stealing he can get whatever he wants without having to contribute his fair share back to the tribe. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that sooner or later someone is going to have a stern word with young Johnson. It doesn't work. He is unable to stop himself from behaving like a tyrant, and eventually Johnson is banished from the tribe. He is thrown out of the village and forced to fend for himself out in the wilds. The young Johnson is now filled with a rage that cannot be contained. He is angry at the tribe, himself, and at life for the injustice of his situation. However, he's smart enough to learn quickly. It's either that or die from cold, exhaustion, or starvation. In time, young Johnson has eaten pretty much everything in the glade he called home for a while, and he realises that to survive he has to move on. So he picks up his blanket, his firestone, and his spear, and he starts walking. One day on his travels, young Johnson comes across a group of people just like himself, who have also been banished from their tribes, for more or less the same reasons as he was ousted from his own. These gypsies have no qualms about lying, cheating and stealing, and he feels quite at home in their company. He joins them in their raids as they travel further north, simply grabbing whatever they need from the villages they pass, raping their women, killing their men, and setting their villages on fire. That'll teach them for casting us out, he thinks, as he gets drunk on stolen mead, relaxing after he and his gang have had their way with a beautiful young girl from a nearby village. In the morning, the gypsies move on, leaving behind a few unpleasant memories and an unborn child who will never know who her real father is. Now wind the clock forward a few thousand years. I don't call them gypsies in any derogatory sense. I call them gypsies because that's what they are. They are the original migrants, the ones who, for whatever reason, were no longer compatible with their own culture, were banished from that culture, and forced out into the woods, where they met with each other and they travelled together to new lands. These travellers had children within their gangs as they travelled, and through their various liaisons with the people from the town and villages they passed through. Over time, their behaviours and instincts, both good and bad, were reinforced and amplified through many generations of evolution from a relatively small genetic group. As the planet became increasingly populated, they began to run out of places to migrate to. It seemed that there were no more empty virgin lands to be found and conquered anymore. So they adapted. Having no qualms about killing, they didn't lose any sleep over the murder of so many good people as these gangs fought and manipulated their way into positions of power in religion, politics and finance all over the world. Now they could hide behind their corporations, governments, religions, criminal organisations and satanic cults and not have to worry about being caught out. They could continue with their deviant and abusive behaviours hidden in the shadows and hidden behind a veneer of respectability while they sought to control and dominate the entire population of the planet while watching the numbers in their bank accounts slowly increase. To me, it just seems like a big old sick game of she who has the most money wins. During the first Gulf War, I was employed by a very large and quite famous old merchant bank in London. They became rich and famous for funding the Napoleonic Wars, both sides. I worked as a network analyst, helping to design, build and operate a secure global network that connected their staff all around the world to the computer systems located at the bank's headquarters. I was literally deep within the heart of the machine, with access to all areas and a stack of software a mate from the Department of Health gave me. Deep inside the machine room, the mainframes of the day still lacked the horsepower to encrypt or compress data streams on the fly. My datascopes, network sniffers and other test equipment sat between the front-end processors and the network devices that handled the encryption workload. Talk about interesting. During my time there, I learned of 2 accounts that had special circumstances associated with them. One of those accounts was owned by the Queen of England, and the other was owned by the Sultan of Brunei. Each account was special because by agreement with the clients, the last 3 digits of their account balances were discarded because the numbers were simply too large to fit into the computer. Their balances were effectively rounded to the nearest £1,000. It was said that the funds within either account could have funded the Gulf War for over 10 years, and that's just the funds deposited with one bank. Most of the clients of the bank no doubt had significant funds deposited with other banks around the world as well. The reason we have so much conflict in the world today is that it makes much more money for the rich and famous than peace does. Satanists say blessed is he who has a few enemies. I definitely click with that meme, and I'm proud to say that I have a number of elite enemies in this world. Christians encourage us to love thy enemy, which is another meme that I click with. I have no problem whatsoever loving my enemy for what he has taught me, for how he behaves. To me it's interesting and no more than that. Buddha once said that we have more to learn from our enemies than from our friends. My enemies have taught me well. One of the latest tricks of the American elitists is called the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. In this agreement, foreign corporations, i.e. American, will have the ability to prevent our government, or any future government, from changing New Zealand law in such a way that they think might undermine their value. Private companies, even though they are not themselves party to the actual agreement, will be able to sue the New Zealand government not in our own lands and courts, but in private tribunals set up specifically for that purpose. In a recent case brought by Chevron, for example, the tribunal ordered the Ecuadorian government, in defiance of its constitution, not to enforce a ruling by Ecuador's appeal court that Chevron must pay $18 billion to clean up toxic waste in the Amazon basin. In his book Collapse, Jared Diamond makes particular mention of the predominantly American extraction industries and their extremely negative attitude when it comes to the economics of cleaning up after themselves. Time and time again, the transnational oil conglomerates have demonstrated that they take zero responsibility for the toxic mess that they create. All that they care about is a healthy return on investment for their shareholders, typically people with a lot more money than sense, it would seem. The satanic memes are encoded within the genes which are responsible for constructing the innermost part of our brains, called the brain stem, and a part of our genetic inheritance that we share with reptiles. This part of our brain is responsible for fundamental biological drives, such as the need to procreate and to feed ourselves, as well as being responsible for many kinds of compulsive behaviour. People with an abundance of satanic memes are prone to self-harm, charlatanism, promiscuity, sadism, pathological lying, manipulation, deceit, domination and control of others, deliberate confusion, and a deeply rooted emotional need for what they consider to be pleasures in life, including unhealthy and extreme sexual acts, pedophilia, rape, addictive drugs, and the love of money. Typically, they are ruthless, driven, motivated, and focused individuals, but motivated by anger, jealousy, lust, greed, hate, and a need for revenge against whoever they consider to be enemies. The satanic memes come to the fore in each and every single one of us from time to time, and some more than others. The most common triggers are prolonged stress, hunger, defeat, abuse, neglect, hate, and more than anything else, sexual jealousy. The impact of these memes in our everyday lives can be lessened through specific amino acids and a loving and nurturing early childhood experience. Once they are adults, it's too late, according to many neuroscientists. The serenity protocols can help on a different level, but the person has to want it. You can drag a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Believe me, we've tried. People who lean this way tend to enjoy snuff movies, videos of people being tortured and killed, child pornography, and mainstream horror films such as the Hostel series, which, if you're brave enough to watch, is a bloody and gruesome portrayal of the emotional need for bloodlust found in some of these people who have already tried and grown bored of every other pleasure in the world and now yearn for the ultimate rush. The storyline revolves around a facility in Eastern Europe where members of a secret cult called the Bloodhound Gang can come and take the life of another human being in whatever gruesome fashion they wish, for a price. Young backpackers are enticed to a nearby village with promises of beautiful women and amazing sex, only to find themselves drugged, kidnapped, shackled to a chair in a dimly lit room and auctioned to the highest bidder. Thankfully, they're only movies. Chapter 7. The Warrior Memes. Returning to our ancient village of Pandora, a long time after young Johnson has been cast out, we find that things are not going so well. While many of the menfolk were out hunting in a remote valley many miles to south, a gang of travelling gypsies has slaughtered many of the villagers, stolen most of their livestock, burned the village to the ground, and taken many of the young women as slaves. By the time the hunters return, it's too late to seek revenge. The gypsies are long gone, and even if the menfolk of Pandora were to catch up with them, they'll be hopelessly outnumbered, exhausted, and weak with hunger. But despite the odds, and against the wishes of his dying father, a young hunter called Sol decides to give chase in an attempt to free the remaining villagers held captive by the gypsies, and to seek revenge for the destruction of everything that he cared about. With his last breath, and realizing that he cannot stop his son, the father wishes young Sol success in his impossible mission as he passes a prized spear to his son, a family heirloom. Sol carefully closes his father's eyes with tears slowly welling in his own. There will be time for tears later, thinks Sol, as he resolves to avenge the death of his father, his clan, and his innocence. He takes just a few minutes to rest and eat a little food before he packs a loaf of bread, some cured meat, a gourd of water, a blanket, and his new spear. Exhausted as he is after the hunting expedition, he finds that the anger within him fuels his body as he runs through the forest, following the trail left by the travelling gang of gypsies. Never in his life has Sol felt so graceful as he gives chase. He had often felt his perceptions heightened as he sensed, tracked, cornered, and killed the wild beasts of the forest. But this was a whole new level entirely, and Sol revelled in it, finding that the pain of his father's death and that of his village was slowly being replaced by a newfound urgency and desire to keep going, to catch up with the gang of marauding gypsies, and to put things right. After 8 days and nights of relentless running, brief periods of rest, eating wild berries, and even an unlucky snake, young Sol suddenly smells wood smoke and the enticing smell of roasting meat wafting up from the valley below. Slowing down and treading carefully, he realizes that he is now caught up with the gypsies, and he carefully starts to observe them, wondering how he can free his people and defeat the gypsies at the same time, all by himself. Slowly a plan emerges in his mind. As he watches, he sees that the meat is only given to the gypsies. The captured villagers are given only gruel and water, nothing more. As evening descends, Sol retreats to a small cave he had noticed as he ran past the entrance and seen the sign. Lighting a small fire to warm himself, he allowed himself a decent rest, ate the rest of his food, carefully sharpened the tip of his spear against a nearby rock, and spent some time practicing with it, familiarizing himself with its weight and balance, subtly different to the spear that he had called his own, until it became an integral part of him, an extension of his left arm. As the light of dawn awoke him, Sol packed his blanket, filled his water gourd from a nearby stream, and set off across the top of the ridge, hoping to find the poisonous toadstools he needed as he travelled quickly, aiming to outflank the gypsies and put himself ahead of them. In a cool glade at the bottom of the valley, he found the toadstools that he needed. The shaman in his village had taught all of the hunters in the village how to find them, and how to gather and prepare them safely. Using some broad leaves from a nearby bush, Sol gathered enough of the colourful toadstools for his purpose, packed them carefully into his satchel, and continued on his way, quickly running through the bush, still intent upon getting ahead of the gang of gypsies by the time they emerged from the valley adjacent to the one he was now travelling through. Finally, as the sun began to set, Sol came to the end of the valley and the beginning of the plains. He hadn't been here for a very long time, being at the extreme end of his tribe's hunting territory. On the grassy plains, there wasn't much to be found in the way of red meat that could be easily caught and killed, and that pretty much dictated the extent of the tribe's territory. Finding a quiet glade, Sol again made a small fire, trusting that the wind would take the smoke away from the direction of the gypsy camp. Not that it mattered. Even if the smoke from his small fire were to drift towards the gypsy gang still camped in the valley adjacent to his position, they would probably not notice, as it would be masked by the smoke from their own fires. Sol knew that the moment the gypsies got to the plain, his fight would be over. His plan relied upon the cover of the forest. Out in the open on the plains, he would be unable to conceal himself, and would be at a considerable disadvantage. his enemy would see him coming from a mile away. Finding a rock with a suitable indentation, Sol placed it carefully in the centre of the large fire, causing it to heat up and then warm the water he had poured into the hollow. Using another smaller rock, he carefully mashed up half of the toadstools into the simmering water, following the instructions carefully taught by Pandora's shaman during his initiation and training so many moons ago. He wrapped the remaining half of the toadstools back in the broad leaves and returned the package to his satchel. Slowly the water began to turn a subtle shade of purple as the sun finally gave way to the moon. Using a couple of sturdy sticks, Sol then very carefully removed the heavy stone from the fire to allow the poisonous mixture to cool naturally as he wrapped himself in his blanket and allowed himself a brief rest. Waking a short time later, he found that the purple-coloured poison was now cool enough to transfer into his water gourd. He drank the remaining water and then used a hollow length of bamboo to suck the liquid into the straw, being very careful not to bring any of the still warm poison into his mouth, and slowly transferred the liquid into his water gourd. Sol then spent a few minutes reflecting on his plan, thinking it through, and satisfying himself that his resolve was strong, that he was ready. Under the cover of darkness, Sol made his way stealthily through the hills to the end of the valley of the gypsies, keeping his senses alert to the presence of any guards that the gypsies would probably have stationed around their camp. Sure enough, as he walked up the valley, he soon heard the quiet murmur of a couple of men talking in a strange language and could smell their foul body odour on the gentle breeze. Positioning himself carefully, Sol threw a rock into the woods behind the men. As one, they turned to peer into the darkness, alert and wondering what had caused the noise. Without hesitation, Sol threw his spear with all of his might and watched it strike the first gypsy, burying itself deep into his enemy's heart. Before his target had even hit the ground, Sol was upon his next victim, using his hunting knife to slash the throat of the other gypsy in one quick, well-practiced move. Satisfied that he had successfully dispatched the two guards without attracting the attention of the gang, he quickly dressed himself in the clothes of one of the dead gypsies and made his way up the valley towards their camp. He had no trouble walking into the camp. Most of the gang were already half drunk on the mead of his village and stoned on the herbs they looked like to smoke as they watched a beautiful young slave woman dancing beside the fire. It was obvious that she was a superb dancer, and equally clear that she didn't really want to be dancing for these gypsies. Pretending to be helping himself to a drink, he quickly poured half the poison into the wooden barrel containing the mead, and the other half into a cauldron of stewing meat and vegetables on the campfire, and then quietly made his way back to the outskirts of the camp to watch and wait for his plan to unfold. It didn't take long for all of the gypsies in the camp to partake of the mead or the stew, or both. Over the course of the next couple of hours, even the guards at the periphery of the camp came in for a feed while others took their place. Satisfied that most of the gypsies had consumed the poisonous toadstool, it was only a matter of time until the poison worked its magic. The first sign that it was having its effect was a very large, barrel-chested gypsy standing unsteadily on his feet and dragging his companion to his feet before throwing a strong punch in his friend's direction. The rest of the gang quickly gathered around. They all enjoyed a good fight from time to time. As the fight escalated and onlookers cheered, adrenaline started to flow in their veins, accelerating the effect of the poison. Before long, other fights broke out amongst the gypsies. Woman fighting woman, men fighting men, women and even children. It was a terrible scene, and it quickly escalated into more and more extreme violence. The guards came running back into the camp, themselves full of rage under the influence of the poisonous toadstools, to find that many of their kin lay dead on the ground already, and the rest were writhing in agony, screaming at the top of their lungs about the monsters and demons tearing into their flesh. After an hour or so, the gypsies all lay dead or dying on the ground. Sol made his way through them all, stabbing any through the heart who were not already dead, without a trace of remorse. Sol contemplated his gruesome task and then began to make his way to the trees on the outskirts of the camp where the remains of his tribe were shackled together, and began to free them all. Seeing the astonished and grateful look in the eyes of his kin, many of whom seemed sobbing, with tears welling in their eyes, none of them had held any hope for anything other than a life of misery and torture at the mercy of the gypsies. Now they had their freedom once more, and were more grateful to soul than words could express. Weak and exhausted, the tribe fed itself on the remains of the untainted gypsy food and water, and as the sun rose they began their slow march back towards Pandora. Once the entire tribe had left, Sol had one last remaining task. Leaving the gypsies where they lay dead on the ground, he removed the remaining toadstools from his satchel and carefully planted them in a suitable spot near the centre of the gypsy gang's campsite. In time, the toadstools would grow all across the glade, feeding off of the corpses of the gypsies and the humus of the damp forest floor. He smelled her first as the breeze drifted around to the north. It was an unusual scent, unfamiliar to him. He pretended not to notice for a few moments, allowing his senses to expand out into the glade and perceive the source of this intoxicating aroma. He had thought that he was alone when he planted the toadstools. It was vital that no outsider should know about the location of the clan's most closely guarded secrets. Suddenly, there was a rush of wind and a rustling of leaves as he heard her come at him from behind. In a heartbeat, he felt time slow down to a crawl as he calmly reached around behind him and grabbed one of her outstretched arms as the blade in her hand passed by his neck, causing a few hairs to sense just how close she had come to achieving her goal. Sol then quickly bent at the waist, using her own momentum to fling her across the glade, where she landed on her back before rolling herself into a ball, and then springing into the air, landing on her feet in a crouched position with a wild look in her eyes. As they looked into each other's eyes across the glade, they both knew in a heartbeat that it was pointless to fight with each other. She was scared, alone, hungry and hurting. So was he. Our warrior memes are encoded within the genes responsible for the creation of the limbic system, an area of the brain that surrounds the brainstem. This area of our brain is primarily associated with our emotional experience and expression, as well as instinctual behaviours such as our fight or flight instinct, our spatial awareness, our competitive desire, our instinct for survival, and our tendency towards taking action in the face of adversity. Ultimately, there are only two emotions. One makes us feel good, and the other causes us to feel bad. In victory, we feel elation and euphoria. In defeat, we feel depressed and alone. All other emotions you can name fit into one of these two categories. Love makes us feel good about ourselves, our friends, our communities, our situation, and our lives. Hate makes us feel bad about everything in our lives. It's normal and natural that we'll do anything to move away from things that make us feel bad and towards the things which make us feel better. Warriors are people who, when all other options have been exhausted, still have a reserve of energy to go out into the wilds and bring home the bacon, where the rest of the tribe lay starving and exhausted. When I feel bad, I dig deep and fight like a bastard for what I believe in. It's an odd paradox that if we want world peace, we may have to fight for it. I sincerely hope that when Project Chrysalis succeeds, the only thing that will get spilled is maybe a few drops of ink. If you think an atomic bomb is powerful, consider this. Ideas can't be killed. Once an idea is in your head, you can't delete it. If you know how to ride a bike, you can't unlearn how to ride a bike. The mind truly is the greatest weapon of them all. So, who's up for a bit of world peace? If not, why not? Chapter 8. The Sovereign Memes. Sol's return to the village of Pandora with his rescued tribe mates and newly friend, the beautiful ex-slave belly dancer called Jaceel, was a truly momentous occasion. By the time they arrived back at the village, almost a full moon after the attack of the gypsies, the remaining villagers had given up all hope of seeing their loved ones or Sol ever again. They had gotten on with their lives, repaired the damage done by the marauding gang, and replenished the dwindling food supplies with the assistance of another village further along the coast. As the weary group entered the village, everyone stopped what they were doing and with glad tears welling in their eyes welcomed home their kin. The fires were stoked, extra food was prepared, and of course the mead was flowing the whole time as the delighted villagers celebrated long into the night. Watching the beautiful Jaceel teach the young girls the kola, her tribe's famous circle dance. Under the bright full moon, as the young men watched and listened to the bard in full swing, and the old men remembered what it was like to be young while enjoying the view, smoking their peace pipes and drinking far too much mead according to their wives. Long after midnight, and finally overcome with exhaustion, Sol returned to his now empty family home, found his bed and collapsed into it, falling immediately into a deep and restful sleep. He hadn't been asleep long when a rustling noise and a breeze of fresh air stirred him. Senses once again alert despite his exhaustion, he peered into the darkness, lit only by the dying embers in the fire pit, and saw her silhouette against the open door frame as her delicious scent wafted into the room. Without a word, Giselle walked across the room to his bed, removed her clothes, and lay down beside him under the warm furs, gently nuzzling up against his warm, hard body, and began to kiss him gently, shushing his half-hearted resistance, and letting him know that she wanted him just as much as he wanted her. In the morning they woke to the sound of bird song and the bard still softly singing and playing his flute for the amusement of the villagers still quietly celebrating the return of their loved ones. They spent most of the morning making love, sleeping, making love again, and sleeping yet again, just like all new lovers since the dawn of time. Eventually, though, their hunger got the better of them, and they reluctantly got out of the bed, got dressed, and went out to find something to eat. As they approached the central circle of the village, they were greeted by a loud cheer from the remaining villagers, who must surely have heard their love-making earlier that morning. Laughing with their mates, they shrugged it off, looked at each other and smiled. It was over. Many moons later, and a long time after Sol and Giselle's daughter Athena had moved out of the family home to start her own family, the villagers decided that they wanted Sol as their nominated leader after much debate around the campfire in the centre of the village. He had become slow in his later years and not much good at hunting compared to his children and their mates, and he really wasn't much good at bashing metal into spears or other weapons and tools in the forgery. Pandora's population had grown quite a bit over the years, both from children born within the clan and from recent migrants who sought the safety and sanctuary of the now fortified village. The casual style of collective leadership that had worked in the past was no longer working for the larger community. Occasionally, violent disputes arise between different groups and individuals, and some of these disputes threatened to destroy the peace and tranquility of life in Pandora. It was clear that to survive, the tribe needed to establish some commonly accepted rules and procedures for dealing with such disputes, and to ensure that everyone's needs were accounted for fairly and equitably. In addition, Pandora was now trading its fine metalwork tools and weapons, including a secret potion made from the poisonous toadstools gathered from the Valley of the Gypsies and sold to other villages and farms in the area. Pandora was becoming increasingly wealthy and influential. The village needed someone to represent their interests when dealing with these outsiders, especially when it came to the thorny question of who they should sell their secret potion to and who they should not. Sol was a natural choice, and he gratefully accepted the newly forged Shield of the Guardian, intricately adorned with patterns and symbols made of colourful gemstones and brightly tanned and highly polished leather at his inauguration ceremony. The sovereign memes are encoded in that part of the brain called the subcortex, which is primarily responsible for body language and other subtle forms of non-verbal communication. The behaviours and instincts associated with the sovereign memes revolve around reaching agreement, maintaining the peace, administering justice, thinking strategically, and considering the needs of the entire community, not just one's own needs and desires. Being an effective leader requires a healthy dose of altruistic tendencies, a good sense of what motivates people and groups, the patience of a saint, much love and compassion, intelligence, and clarity of thought. It's no surprise that most effective leaders are only invited to the position in their later years. Life has given them many experiences, most of which cause genuine leaders to seek better ways of resolving disputes than by taking up arms. Like many old warriors, Sol was not very much in favour of battle and would do anything to avoid it. His experience with the gypsies still gave him nightmares from time to time. In the end, that was all the qualification for the job that he needed. The man of tomorrow is forged by the battles of today. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. Hence, a prince who wants to keep his authority must learn how not to be good, and to either use that knowledge or refrain from using it as necessity requires. The Prince, Niccolo Machiavelli, 1469-1527.